Hi everyone, welcome to Gallant IAS. Let's go 120 plus. Here we discuss some of the probable questions and the type of questions that can be asked by UPSC for the upcoming UPSC Prelims 2021. Today we're going to discuss some questions from Indian economy, and economy is very important area for UPSC Prelims. You can expect at least 15, 16, 17 questions from economy. Okay, and the majority of the questions will be like concepts related. If you are thorough in concepts, then you can easily answer the question, and all the questions will be in a standard or easy to medium. There will not be any very tough questions. So understanding the concepts very well. That's what the key to get marks from Indian economy. So let's solve 1, 2, 3 questions. Okay. So look at the first question. Consider the following statement. Revenue deficit represents that the government's earnings are not sufficient to meet the day-to-day operations of its administration. Second statement. Effective revenue deficit is the difference between revenue deficit and the interest paid by the government on loans obtained in the past. Primary deficit is the difference between physical deficit of the current year and the grants for creation of capital assets. So here the question is talking about three kinds of deficits: revenue deficit, effective revenue deficit, primary deficit. So just look at each deficit. Revenue deficit. What is revenue deficit? Every budget there is two parts. One revenue part, another capital part. There is revenue expenditure, revenue receipt, capital expenditure and capital receipts. What is revenue deficit? It is excessive revenue expenditure over revenue receipts of a government. That is what revenue deficit is. That means government could not meet day-to-day operations with the receipts, with its revenue receipts. That is what revenue deficit is. Revenue expenditure greater than revenue receipts. What is revenue receipts? Receipts of the government that will not create any liability, any assets or liability. Okay. Revenues of government that receipts of the government that neither create assets nor create liability. That is what revenue receipts of government. Okay, and also revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure also neither create assets or nor create liabilities. Okay, so revenue deficit is the difference between revenue expenditure and revenue receipts. Okay, using this revenue receipts, government meeting its day-to-day expenditures. That is revenue expenditures like giving salary, pension, interest, grants, etc. Okay, so what are the revenue receipts? Like taxes collected by government, non-taxable income of the government, interest received by government. These are revenue receipts of government. So revenue receipts is the excessive revenue expenditure over revenue deficit is excessive revenue expenditure over revenue receipts. Then next, effective revenue deficit. What is effective revenue deficit? Just I said, revenue expenditure will not create the expenditure done by the government. If those expenditures are revenue expenditure, it will not create any assets or liability. It will not increase or decrease assets or increase or decrease liability. Okay, but there are some expenditures, revenue expenditures of government that is indirectly create assets. That is grants in need provided for state. In central government point of view, the grants in need provided for state is a day-to-day expenditure, or the expenditure will not create any direct impact to the central government. Okay, but indirectly it is creating assets. Directly it is not creating assets. Government is not directly spending for infrastructure using that grants in need. Central government is not directly spending to create infrastructure using grants in need, but the state government by receiving the grants in aid provided by the central government, creating assets in their own states. So this grants in aid, using the receiving grants in aid, the state governments can build hospitals, schools, roads, infrastructure facilities in their respective states. So grants in aid is indirectly contributing for asset creation. So effectively, grants in aid is not just creating impacts of revenue expenditure, it is also creating an impact of capital expenditure. That is creating an asset. So by deducting this grants in aid from revenue deficit, we are calculating the effective revenue deficit. That means revenue deficit minus grants in aid provided for the states. Okay, revenue deficit minus grants in aid, what? Effective revenue deficit. Then primary deficit. What is primary deficit? So we have discussed about revenue deficit and effective revenue deficit. Then primary deficit. Like I said, there are two portions for every budget: revenue portion and capital portion. Revenue expenditure and revenue receipts. Capital expenditure and capital receipts. Okay. So if we calculate the total expenditures and if we deduct the total revenue of the government in the whole budget, we get fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is a portion in the budget or the amount that government need to borrow to fulfill its overall commitments in that particular year, including both revenue and capital portions. Okay, so that is what fiscal deficit. Difference between the total receipts and the expenditure of the government. If expenditures of government is higher than its revenue, that is what fiscal deficit is. If we deduct interest payments of loan taken in earlier years from this fiscal deficit, we get primary deficit. What is the need to calculate primary deficit? Like I said, primary deficit is fiscal deficit less interest on loans taken in previous years. Actually, fiscal deficit, like I said, is the amount the government need to borrow to meet its overall expenditure in a year. Okay, amount excessive over its receipts to meet. By using the receipts or income of the government, they meet their expenditure. If the expenditure is above its income, then they need to borrow. So that portion is what fiscal deficit is. By using this fiscal deficit, if government have to pay any interest rates, they also need to pay that. So the need to calculate primary deficit is that when government is calculating the deficit or the money they have to borrow in a particular year to spend in that year, that is what primary deficit is. Money they need to borrow to spend only on those items which are incurred in that particular years only. That is what primary deficit is. Fiscal deficit minus interest accrued or interest they have to pay on previous year loans. Okay, that is what primary deficit is. So just look at the statements. Revenue deficit represents that the government's earnings are not sufficient to meet the day-to-day operations of its administration. Actually, that is correct. Revenue deficit represents the government's earnings are not sufficient to meet the day-to-day operation. That is, revenue expenditure is higher than revenue receipts. Then effective revenue deficit is the difference between revenue deficit and interest paid by the government on loans obtained in the past. No, it is the difference between effective revenue deficit and grants in aid. Okay, that is grants for the creation of capital assets provided for state. That is what effective revenue deficit is. So the second statement is wrong. So you can eliminate option B and D. Third statement, primary deficit is the difference between fiscal deficit of the current year and the grants for the creation of capital assets. Again, it is wrong. Primary deficit is the difference between physical deficit and the interest paid by the government on loans obtained in the past. So the third statement is also wrong. You can then eliminate option C and D. Answer is A, 1 only. Then next, it related with the import of India. Russia is the third largest export destination of India after the USA and UAE. India is the second largest export destination of Ukraine in the Asia Pacific region. Third statement, Russia is the largest exporter of wheat in the world. Which of the statements given above are correct? Option A, 1 and 2 only, B, 2 and 3 only, C, 1 and 3 only, D, 1, 2 and 3. Actually, Russia is not the largest export destination or the second largest export destination or not the third largest export destination of India. The largest export destination of India is USA and the second largest is UAE. Then third largest is not Russia, it is China, and the fourth largest Bangladesh. And Russia is not in the first 8 largest export destination of India list. India has uh, trade with Russia which is less than around $10 billion, and India's trade value with China is around $125 billion. Okay, so Russia is not the third largest export destination of India. So the first statement is wrong. If you know that first statement is wrong, even if you don't know the second and third statement, you will get the answer. Just eliminate the statements which include statement 1. So the answer is B, 2 and 3 only. Even though just look at the second and third statement. India is the largest export destination of Ukraine in the Asia Pacific region. That is correct. Ukraine is one of the largest exporter of wheat and vegetable oil to the world. Russia and Ukraine combined export around 25% of the wheat of the world. Okay, 25% of wheat is exported by Russia and Ukraine combined, and also Ukraine exporting vegetable oil to our country. So in second statement, it is correct. India is the largest export destination of Ukraine in the Asia Pacific region. Then third statement, Russia is the largest exporter of the wheat in the world. That is also correct. Russia is the largest exporter of the wheat in the world. Russia and Ukraine combined exporting around more than 100 million tons of wheat worldwide. India is exporting hardly less than 10 million wheat. Even though India is one of the largest producer of wheat, we are not exporting much because of the domestic need of wheat. Okay, so second and third statements are correct. So the answer is option B, 2 and 3. Next, swift challenge often seen in news is related to A. Bidding for infrastructure project, appeal procedure, International Court of Justice, 24/7 challenge of Global Climate Action Summit, seizure of black money siphoned offshore. Here the answer is A. Bidding for infrastructure projects. It is related with infrastructure projects. What is swift challenge method? It is different from normal bidding processes. Normally, when government for creating an infrastructure for implementing a new plan, what the government do? First, government realize the need and they prepare a plan of action and invite the bidders, and the largest bidder get the project. But here, government has no idea to do anything. But a private or public party come with their own project. Let's say government has 100 acre of barren land and they do not have any plans for that land. But a private company comes with a plan to set up a solar park there effectively. Then government get the idea. Then the government invite bidders to prepare to construct a solar park there. Here the idea is provided by private or public players, other players than government. Okay, that is what swift challenge method. Then the government inviting bidders and the largest bidder get the chance. Okay, so that is what swift challenge is. So the answer is option A, bidding for infrastructure projects. So that's all. Thank you.